So nobody finds it interesting that MOANA goes looking for her ancestors that are connected to the sea and she comes back with Nigros? Nobody thinks that's interesting. Yeah, truth hidden in plain sight that people just miss. But
hi family, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well whatever you are. I myself am also fine. If you are seeing me for the very first time, I hope you do consider subscribing to the channel so that you don't miss anything that I'll be uploading. So without even wasting time, in today's video we are going to be looking at some of the clips from MOANA. I know I made a video already about the reactions from different people about MOANA, and if you haven't really watched it, I'm going to be putting it up here. You can also check it out. So in today's video we are going to be looking at this melanin girl who came out and said that the people who came from underground in MOANA 2, they were Nigros, which actually sparked off other people's reactions. Let's continue watching these videos, and of course I'm going to come back and give my own views.
searching for ancestors at sea and comes back with Nigros. Why is that offensive?
Jordana, so no one's offended by your point here that melanated people populated the earth. They're offended because you keep calling Melanesian people African, which is wrong. And it's not wrong because there's anything wrong with being African or descendants of African people. It's wrong because it's erasing Melanesian culture. So let's add some more context, right? As we know, the MOANA movies are a Disney franchise loosely based on my people, the people of the South Pacific Ocean. What a lot of people don't know is this region is divided into three main groups: Polynesians, Micronesians, and Melanesians. The first MOANA movie, Polynesian people and arguably Micronesian people were visually represented. However, it was obvious that Melanesian people were missing. In the second MOANA movie, when she goes out in search of other Pacific Islanders and comes back with Black Islanders who have Afro hair, if you're unfamiliar with the culture, you might mistaken them as Africans. However, for Pacifica people, especially Melanesian people, we knew who they represented. And that is why these scenes are so emotional for a lot of us, because it's a moment of like, fuck, finally, our Melanesian cousins are being acknowledged. Finally, our Melanesian cousins are being represented. Finally, the world is exposed to the whole Pacific region and not just us here in Polynesia. Melanesian culture is beautiful, it's vast, it's diverse, and it is as much indigenous to this region as my Polynesian ancestors are. It's unfair as an audience to reduce their identity down to just being black. They are proud Pacific Islanders who deserve to have their moment right now.
So nobody finds it interesting that MOANA goes looking for.
So to answer your question, no and yes. No, because the people in the video that you are generally referring to in the context of this video, they are the indigenous people of Melanesia. To give you a brief history background about the South Pacific, so during the late 17th century, during the colonial period, European settlers have now arrived in the South Pacific, and they decide to divide the regions into three just so they can make it manageable in terms of colonial interest and navigation. But not my ancestors, I digress. That's a video for another day. Then they decide to name the three regions Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia. Now, for context of this video, in order for us to understand the name given to these regions, we have to understand and break down the meaning of their names. So Melanesia, right here, Mela, the root word here, derives from the word melanin, meaning dark skin, and then Nesia, meaning island. Therefore, if you were to put them together, dark-skinned people inhabiting islands. Therefore, Melanesia stretches from Papua New Guinea all the way to east of Fiji, if you can see it here. Now, to answer the second part of your questions, yes, we are all connected by the sea, by the ocean. Although these colonizing terms are given to us, at the end of the day, we're all brothers and sisters. We just happen to share the same body of water. I hope that helps.
So I made a lot of people mad by saying that MOANA goes in search of her ancestors at sea and comes back with Nigros. Why is that offensive? Because all you're doing is proving my point.
No, the only thing you've proven is that you're uneducated and wrong. Historically, genetically, and linguistically, you're wrong on all fronts in regards to Melanesians being African or the N-word. Melanesia has the most languages in the world, with 800 in Papua New Guinea alone, plus 100 in Vanuatu, 70 in the Solomon Islands, 30 Kanak languages in New Caledonia, and 250 native languages in West Papua. These languages and cultures are unique to Melanesia, distinct from Africa. Unless if you speak all those languages and you're claiming that Africans can speak them too, then they would have a shared history, but they do not, because those are unique to Melanesia.
Girl, like literally hate to break it to you, but the root word of Melanesian is literally melanin.
The term Melanesia, as you explain, melas is the root word in Greek for black. However, Nesia means islands. So if you are black and you're from the islands, you are Melanesian. So Melanesians have 50,000 years of unique history in their islands. To label them as African erases their culture and history in the islands specifically. Technically speaking, Melanesians are also distinct, carrying Denisovian DNA, a marker absent in Africans. In fact, the Melanesians have the highest percentage of Denisovian DNA. And lastly, it's wrong to try gaslight entire nations and people into denying their own identity. Some people would call that racist.
So nobody finds it interesting that Moana goes looking for her ancestors that are connected to the sea and she comes back with Nigros?
Hello, my friend. How could Moana have African-appearing ancestors if she's meant to be Polynesian? This is an understandable mistake, but the people depicted in Moana 2 are not meant to be African, but instead Melanesians. While the Melanesian appearance shares a lot in common with the appearance of populations in Africa, they're actually further genetically to Africans than Europeans are. The story of Moana is rooted in the history of the Austronesian migration. Around 4,000 years ago, it's understood that Austronesian-speaking people began their voyages from Taiwan, moving across the islands of Southeast Asia. As they sailed, parts of their population settled in islands they crossed, developing into the populations of Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, to name a few. They eventually sailed across the Pacific Ocean, and some even reached Madagascar, leading to the people of Madagascar today. It's the part of the migration where they started sailing across the Pacific Ocean that explains what you saw in the movie, as well as why Polynesians tend to appear physically different than their Indonesian or Filipino cousins. The Austronesians that sailed towards the Pacific began interacting with the Melanesians, who today remain residing in the islands of Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and Fiji. Over thousands of years, these groups remained interacting with each other, trading goods, ideas, and even genetics. And so that's why Polynesians and, well, Moana would have some Melanesian ancestry.
So I made a lot of people mad by saying that Moana goes in search of her ancestors at sea and comes back with Nigros. The people responding, they're not Nigros, they're Melanesians. They have afros, come from what we come from.
Narratives like these are not only problematic, but it participates in the erasure and in the oversimplification of histories when it comes to how different Melanesians are from indigenous Africans, because both of these two groups of people have unique cultures, identity, and history. And when you group them together, you not only oversimplify the history, but you erase their identity. And because Melanesians have their own distinct culture, practices, language that is distinct and removed from the African continent. Whilst there is distinct similarities when it comes to phenotype, they're not Africans. And it's crazy how some of you don't realize that these type of views stems from Eurocentric frameworks that categorize every single person that does not look white in a box that if they look the same, they must be from the same group of people. And culture, identity, and language is tied very much to land. And when you call indigenous Melanesian people Africans, you are trying to push a narrative to try and erase their identity when it comes to Pacific region, because that's where they are originally from.
So nobody finds it interesting that Moana goes looking for her ancestors that are connected to the sea and she comes back with Nigros? Nobody thinks that's interesting.
Common mistake, but this man is Melanesian. Now, based off the everyone came from Africa theory, basically the way that migration worked is this is the Polynesian triangle, then we have Micronesia and Melanesia. Now, Melanesia was obviously populated much earlier and first. Compare this to Aotearoa, 1,500, and Australia, which had 50,000. And Papua New Guinea, or the Papuans, which is part of Melanesia, was roughly, according to genetic markers, 50,000 years ago they were populated this area. And since they pretty much came straight out of Africa, this is why many Melanesians are mistaken commonly for African people. European colonizers even did this thing called blackbirding, which is basically slavery. And they called these islanders or Melanesians or Polynesians or even Aboriginal Australians as the N-word. And they put them on cane fields in Queensland. So similar to the slave trade, they also had that in the islands too. And this is why many islanders, because of the trauma of what happened in their history, refuse to use the N-word and think that it's extremely disrespectful to refer to Melanesians or Polynesians or Pacific Islanders as such. Now, as for Moana, why is she related to Melanesian? She's Polynesian. Well, you see, in order to get to Polynesia, they would have had to have come through this same migration. So they did intermix between Polynesians, Melanesians, based off the theories of migration. So technically, they all have a common ancestor. And culturally and linguistically, places like Fiji, for example, actually identify as Polynesian because their language is closer to Polynesian languages. But the studies genetically basically proved that they were Papuan. Now, obviously, amongst every different Polynesian nation, as for example in Aotearoa, or the Maori believe that they came straight from Hawaii, which is not necessarily like a real place. It could also be spiritual depending on the iwi. But our origin stories differ from what the science and genetics also say. So although the science says like this is what happened, many people within the islands don't actually believe that. Some islanders, for example, believe that they were just created and then born on that island. Like their origin is like they were just from that land. So yeah, they're Melanesian, they're not the N-words. But technically they're also Polynesian culturally and linguistically, so yeah, they can also refer to themselves as Polynesian as well.
So this always comes out as a result of cultural clashes. So her saying that the people who came out from underground in MOANA 2, they were Nigros, it kind of sparked of these people to come out and educate her and even tell her more that actually what you're saying is wrong. Those were not Nigros, but instead were Melanesians. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce these words, but I myself, personally, I am just learning because I always see many people coming out and saying, oh, not everyone who is black, they came from Africa. So I don't know, you as a person who is watching my video, what do you think about these videos? Did you know about other blacks who came from different parts of the world? I really want to learn more. So we remember when we were watching when we watched the video of the hacker, very many people came out and said that it was evil. Even some other people came out and said that MOANA 2 was evil. So literally everyone was giving their own opinion. But really what sparked off this specific video is the fact that she said that the people who came out from underground, they were Nigros. And people are saying, oh, you are being racist. You are being racist now. Why are you even using the N-word? Her saying Nigros, it sounded to be an N-word. I don't know what you think about these videos. Put it down in the commentary, and of course we shall meet again. I myself, I would really love to learn more from you. I love you all.